Kenneth strolled through the bustling Oyingbo markets, his eyes darting to and fro, taking in the vibrant display of foodstuffs meticulously arranged on each vendor's table to lure in buyers. There were raw egusi seeds, glossy ogbono seeds, heaps of crayfish, and freshly roasted peanuts, among other offerings. The aroma of smoked and well-dried fish wafted through the air, mingling with the lively chatter of traders and the occasional hum of bargaining customers, creating an atmosphere alive with energy and promise. "Oga, wetin you want? I get am," one vendor said, beckoning on Kenneth to come to her stall and buy from her. "Oga, come my shop na, come check," another vendor called. Kenneth stood looking confused. He had never been to the market, a major part of his entire adult life. He could recall going to the market as a young teenage boy with his mother, and even alone when his mother would send him on errands. But that was many years ago. Now, as a grown man, Kenneth is occupied with work, running his engineering and building construction company as a successful and top-tier engineer. Growing up, Kenneth had always enjoyed delicious and well-prepared homemade meal. This made it difficult for him to eat from restaurants and fast foods, unlike some of his friends and business associates. And even when he had left his home for the university, he was always cooking his meals. He found the time to cook his meals with the foodstuffs he usually brought with him to school from home at the end of every holiday. But after school, and when he started his business, he couldn't find the time to cook his meals anymore. And with his speedily thriving business, Kenneth worked on Saturdays as well and only had Sundays to rest after church. So, he had employed the services of a cook, a young man and a good cook named Udo. However, Udo worked for him for only 2 years as an uncle of his called him over to another state to help him manage his new restaurant business. Kenneth felt bad when Udo left, and since then, he had not had a decent meal. He had employed 3 different cooks after Udo left, but none was a good cook, at least not to his taste and satisfaction. So, he ate mostly snacks after every long day of work. He had turned to his girlfriend Bimbo to help him, but unfortunately, Bimbo also couldn't cook. Kenneth, being a loving man, had not been bothered by the fact that Bimbo couldn't cook. But he had asked her to help him shop for the food items and other ingredients, at least, because he didn't have the time to do so himself. He hoped that if the ingredients and food items were available at home, he could create time to wake up very early before dawn to prepare meals that would last him for some days. However, Bimbo was not one of such ladies who was homely, and so was not knowledgeable about shopping for food items in the local markets. So, though she tried because Kenneth was a man, she ended up shopping for the wrong and not needed food items and ingredients, which were entirely different from the ones in the list Kenneth had given to her. Worse still, she diverted the bulk of the money to buy personal clothing stuffs and accessories for herself. This she did twice, and it caused a quarrel between her and Kenneth, which eventually led to their breakup. So, on this day, which was a Saturday morning, Kenneth decided to make out time to shop for himself. After all, since he wants an original and an exclusive homemade meal, it was not out of place if he goes to the market himself. he told himself that weekend. And that was why he was in the market that morning. Oga, stockfish dey o, come see am, a different vendor called out to Kenneth again, startling him back from his confused state. Kenneth brought out the shopping list from his wallet as he looked at it and began going from store to store, shopping for the items on his list. After about 50 minutes of going from one store to another, Kenneth was done with buying soup items. He looked up his list again and remembered that he had also written down ripe plantain. Kenneth loves fried ripe plantain, his dodo, as he fondly calls it, like every other common Nigerian. So, he knew he could not afford to forget to buy ripe plantains. Madam, please, where can I find ripe plantains to buy? Kenneth asked the vendor whose stall he was in and where he had bought the last item. The woman, speaking and demonstrating with her hands, began describing to Kenneth where he would find it and how he would get there. However, Kenneth was not getting the woman's description. Oga, when you come out from this lane, you go waka go straight small, then turn left, then you waka go front small, then you go turn right again. You go see one lane where they dey sell fresh catfish. You go enter that lane, then come waka go front small. Then the woman kept describing, which got Kenneth confused already. The woman noticed his confusion and stopped. Hi, my pikin no dey now o. If not, if I go show you the place, the woman said. Now, there was a young lady who had also come to buy from the stall next to the one Kenneth was. She also noticed Kenneth's confusion as a result of the woman's overly complicated directions. So, she offered to help. Mister, if you would wait for another 5 minutes for me to buy a few more things in this lane, I can show you the way, the lady said to Kenneth. Oh, no problem, I can wait, Kenneth said almost immediately, grateful for the lady's offer to help. He had dedicated that day to doing market errands, so waiting for a few minutes for someone who had offered to help him out was no big deal. The lady was done in 5 minutes like she said, and returned to take Kenneth to the section where ripe plantain were sold in bulk. As they walked along the markets, Kenneth realized that the vendor who had tried to describe the place to him had not exaggerated. The place was indeed far and was confusing to locate. For a second, fear crept into Kenneth's heart, and he feared that the young lady might be leading him to a wrong place where he could be robbed or maybe kidnapped. He had heard tales of people being led to a robbery or kidnapper's den by simply asking for directions to a place. His heart began to pound fast in his chest as he wearily glanced around. But just then, they turned to a corner and he saw the plantain section. Kenneth let out a silent sigh of relief. The plantain section was filled with activity and with piles of plantain bunches everywhere, both ripe and unripe ones. Each vendor had neatly arranged their goods and were calling out to potential buyers as they hoped to make sales. Madam, come, I go give you better price, many of the vendors called out. That vendor over there has good plantain bunches. Take a look. I think you should buy from him, the lady said to Kenneth, pointing to one of the stores. I agree with you. Thank you, Kenneth replied and walked towards the vendor while the lady followed behind him. When they reached the store, the lady stood a few steps backwards and watched silently as Kenneth began negotiating with the seller. "Oga, this your plantain is too expensive. Let me pay 17,000 naira now," Kenneth said, trying to argue. "No, Oga, the last price is 21,000 naira," the plantain seller replied firmly. Kenneth sighed and after a brief pause said, "Okay, no problem, bring it." And then he pulled out his wallet to make the payment. The seller smiled and was trying to reach out for a sack to package the plantain for Kenneth when the lady suddenly stepped forward. "Oga, you are a thief," she exclaimed, her voice sharp and accusing as she glared at the seller angrily. "So, because you see a rich Ajebo man, you want to make extra profit off him, eh?" The lady turned to Kenneth and explained to him that the seller had almost tripled the price because he could perceive that Kenneth was a rich man who was unfamiliar with the market prices. "This plantain bunch is asking you to pay 21,000 naira for shouldn't cost more than 9,000 naira at the very most," she told Kenneth. The seller, visibly irritated, told her to mind her business. "Oga, I gave you a fair price, oh. Don't mind this lady," he told Kenneth. But the lady refused to back down and accused the seller of trying to take advantage of Kenneth. For a few moments, Kenneth stood there, watching the lady and the seller argue. Finally, he spoke up. "Miss, don't worry. Let me just pay him. If he's cheating me, let him deal with his conscience," he said calmly, hoping that his words would de-escalate the situation. But the lady shook her head. "No way. I can't stand by and watch you pay such a ridiculous amount," she said, and told Kenneth that they should leave this particular seller and go to another one at the other end of the plantain market section. And before Kenneth could respond, she grabbed his hands and pulled him away from the store. As they walked past, a few other vendors around the first one called out to them, promising to give them a better price. "Let us be. You all are the same. I am sure you heard this man trying to cheat my friend, but none of you said a word," the lady snapped back. Kenneth let out a sigh as she dragged him forward, realizing he had no choice but to follow her lead. When they reached the other side of the markets, Kenneth realized the lady had been right all along. The seller there were offering the plantains for 11,000 naira, and these bunches were even bigger than the ones from the previous vendor. This time, Kenneth stood aside and watched the lady negotiate with the seller on his behalf. The lady was able to argue the price down to 7,000 naira. Kenneth was impressed and decided to buy 2 bunches. As they finished, Kenneth turned to the lady and thanked her sincerely for her help. He also offered to drop her off at her destination. Well, she hesitated at first, but Kenneth insisted. On their way, as Kenneth drove, he found himself smiling. He couldn't stop replaying the events at the market in his mind. This stranger hadn't just shown him where to buy plantains. She had also saved him from a greedy seller and spared him from spending an outrageous amount. Her boldness and quick thinking fascinated him, and deep down, Kenneth knew he would love to have someone like her as a friend. The lady, however, remained quiet throughout the ride. "Mister, I will be dropping at the next street," the lady said some moments later, breaking the long silence. It was at that moment Kenneth realized he hadn't introduced himself properly. "My name is Kenneth," he said warmly, glancing at her. "May I know your name?" "Dubem. My name is Dubem," the lady replied. When they arrived at her destination, Kenneth handed her his mobile number and kindly asked for hers, which she gave. The following week, Kenneth got a new contract and got so occupied with work in the next 7 weeks that he completely forgot about Dubem. However, as the contract was almost completed and he now had a little time, he thought of going to the market again because the food items he had chopped for the last time were almost running out. And that was when he remembered Dubem. He recalled that his shopping became easier the last time immediately she joined him. So, he picked up his mobile phone and dialed her number with uneasy hands, though, as he feared that she may not take his call. He was happy, however, when Dubem picked. He asked her if she could accompany him to the market, and Dubem agreed. At the market, Kenneth learned from Dubem that she's a personal shopper. What Dubem does is to go to the market for people who are busy and couldn't find the time to do so themselves. And these people would pay her for her services. Dubem told Kenneth that he could focus on work and send her next time instead for just a token. Kenneth told her that he had taken notes and promised to relax next time and use her services instead. He also paid her for accompanying him this time. However, Kenneth did not stay back and allow Dubem do the shopping for him like he promised to. Instead, he went with Dubem as he was beginning to enjoy her company and loved to watch her negotiate and argue with the vendors. He noticed that from the second time after their first meeting, he could afford to spare some time to go to the markets as long as Dubem was going with him. And though he always paid her for it gave him joy. He also realized that Dubem's meticulous nature made him get stuffs at very fair and low prices. He never would have been able to get them if he came on his own. In no time, Kenneth realized that he had fallen for Dubem, and one day, after they were done at the markets, he confessed to her how he feels about her and asked Dubem to be his girlfriend. Dubem did not give him a reply immediately and asked that he gave her time to think about it. Well, after a period of 1 month, Dubem agreed to date Kenneth. While they dated, Kenneth also noticed that Dubem was a meticulous spender. She wasn't like the other girls he dated in the past, who would demand for huge amounts to buy wigs and to go shopping, or would order very expensive food and assorted drinks whenever they go on dates. Dubem only ordered for a plate of simple meals, often white rice and stew or jollof rice. And instead of chicken, shrimp or fish like the other girls he knew would order, Dubem would rather request for a single beef. She would also order no drink but only water, even when Kenneth insisted. And every time he gave her money or gifted her something, she would thank him and thank him endlessly, almost as though she worshipped him. Kenneth was thrilled by Dubem's character. He knew Dubem was from a poor background, but knew that not every girl from a poor background was this meticulous and appreciative of gifts. On the contrary, some sought after rich men to help them out of their poor background. After courting for months, Kenneth asked Dubem to be his wife. And again, Dubem opted for a very simple wedding dress and outfits that cost so little. Kenneth tried to convince her to go for a designer wedding dress and a good classy makeup artist since he could afford it. But Dubem objected, saying, "Is it not just for a day? Please, my darling, save the money. We can use it for something important when we are married and in the future. We shouldn't waste money on frivolities," she said. Kenneth was amazed and wondered what manner of woman God had blessed him with. He felt lucky as he believed that he was marrying a woman who would be a good manager of his home. But little did he know that he was in for something worse. The morning after their 1 week honeymoon, Kenneth was going to resume work in his office. He was dressed and sat at the dining table, waiting for Dubem, who was in the kitchen and was preparing his breakfast. And when Dubem was done and served him the breakfast, he noticed that the hot chocolate drink Dubem had made for him was almost pale. She had added only half a tablespoon of chocolate powder and half a teaspoon of milk powder. What was supposed to be a hot chocolate drink was looking like an ordinary hot colored water. And along with the hot drink she had served him was just a slice of bread and a very little scrambled eggs that was just like the size of a nut. Kenneth stared at the breakfast, confused and wondering why Dubem had served him such. "My love, thank you for the breakfast, but I'll need more chocolate powder and milk in my drink. 3 more slices of bread and a little more egg," Kenneth said calmly to Dubem, trying not to sound disappointed and not to sound unappreciative of her efforts. Dubem smiled but shook her head. "Sorry, honey, but you can't get more," she replied. Kenneth raised a brow, curious as to why not. "Why not?" he asked, his tone still gentle. "Because what I served you is enough," Dubem said confidently. "Ha, enough? But this meal is barely enough to nourish a child, let alone an adult like me," Kenneth said, staring at the sparse breakfast in disbelief. Then a thought crossed his mind. Perhaps Dubem was trying to prank him, he reasoned. He smiled and decided to play along. "Okay, my love, I know you are trying to prank me," Kenneth said in a light and playful tone. "But can it wait until I get back from work? Then we can enjoy all the pranks and tricks. For now, I need to eat quickly and head out," he told her. But this time, Dubem didn't smile. "Who said I was playing a prank? I am not playing any prank on you. That is your breakfast," she replied. Kenneth, still convinced that she was joking, decided not to argue. He had to be in the office early that morning to meet a new client. So, scooping the small portion of scrambled egg onto the single slice of bread, he ate quickly. As for the so-called chocolate drink, he ignored it entirely and drank water instead. Just as he was about to enter his car, Dubem came out and handed him a lunch bag with a smile. "Take, here is your lunch," she said. Kenneth's face lit up. His earlier doubts was erased. He grinned at her as he took the bag. "I knew the breakfast was just a test and a prank. Thank you, my love," he said, smiling warmly. However, during lunchtime, when Kenneth opened the food flask, eager and excited to enjoy his meal, he was met with disappointment once again. Dubem had served him a very small portion of white rice. On top of it was a tiny amount of stew, barely enough even for the little rice she had packed. In the stew was a tiny piece of chicken. It was so small, it seemed as though it was a medium size of chicken breast that was cut into 30 parts. The piece was no bigger than a cherry. Kenneth stared at what was supposed to be his lunch, confused and shocked. No, this is beyond a prank," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. Was Dubem trying to starve him? He wondered. And why would she want to do that? He picked up his phone and was going to call Dubim to find out if he had done something wrong for her to have given him such breakfast and lunch. But then, he changed his mind and dropped the phone, deciding to talk about it only when he gets home. Hungry and having no choice, Kenneth ate his tiny lunch and later asked his company's messenger to buy him snacks to fill up. Kenneth arrived home late at night from work. He had waited to take a foreign client whose building he was working on for the client to inspect. The client's flights had been delayed and had landed late, thereby extending Kenneth's wait time and meeting with the clients. He had texted Dubim to inform her about the meeting and to tell her that he was going to be home late. Well, in the evening, as Kenneth drove into his compound, he saw Dubim sitting at the veranda in front of the house and was eating her dinner. The interior and inside of the house was completely dark except for the veranda, which was lit up. Kenneth, seeing this and seeing that Dubim was sitting outside eating instead of inside, came out of the car quickly, worried that something may have gone wrong with the electricity in the house. "My love, what is it? What happened to the light inside?" he asked Dubim, his expression showing that of worry and concern. "Nothing, oh honey, nothing. I only turned the lights off, and I am sitting outside to receive fresh air," came Dubim's reply. "You turned the lights off? But why?" Kenneth asked, puzzled. "Because I want to save power," Dubim answered. Kenneth stared at Dubim, baffled. "You want to save power, and of all the time of the day, you choose to do it at night when everywhere is dark?" Kenneth asked, still trying to understand. "No, honey, I didn't even turn them on during the day. I also only watched TV for just 1 hour. I did not overuse the electricity at all," Dubim explained. Kenneth, surprised by Dubim's answer and unsure of how to respond, sighed deeply. He walked into the house, turned on the lights and air conditioners, and shook his head slightly, still trying to process what had just happened. Although Kenneth had planned to have the discussion about the breakfast and lunch Dubim had offered him that day, the issue with the electricity distracted him and made him forget about it. He also skipped dinner and retired to bed because he did not feel hungry. However, the next morning, when Dubim served him breakfast again, and it was the same as before, Kenneth couldn't hold back any longer. "What is the meaning of this? Why have you been giving me such small and poorly nutritious meals?" Kenneth asked, unable to hide his frustration any longer. For breakfast that day, Dubim served him custard and a single slice of bread. The custard was plain with no milk added. Kenneth, who usually have creamy custard, could not imagine himself to have the kind of custard Dubim just served him. "There is milk in this house, so why am I not getting any in my custard?" Kenneth asked, irritated. Dubim told him that he could have the custard without milk, and that milk is meant only for hot chocolate drink. "The same hot chocolate drink you barely added milk to yesterday?" Kenneth asked, shocked and upset by Dubim's response. "We need to be cautious with how we use things. We don't have to use or waste things because God has blessed us. We must manage things," Dubim said. She went further to explain why she served Kenneth so little food, ate only little food herself, and why she had turned off the lights. "If we start using things like there is no end, what happens when there is nothing left? It is better to manage now than to regret later. Do you know how many people and families who lose everything because they did not know how to manage? Just because we have money does not mean we should use it anyhow and waste it, Dubem said. Kenneth stared at his wife, finally learning the reason and motive behind her actions, but found it absurd and unbelievable. He appreciated the fact that she was not wasteful and is trying to manage things, but he knew she was going about it the wrong way. He believed that managing resources does not mean that they should deprive themselves of good and nutritious meals or basic comforts, especially since they could afford it. Kenneth, with a calm and gentle tone, told Dubem that he appreciates her efforts in trying to manage resources and save money. But he explained to her that she was going about it the wrong way, however, explaining further why they should have and enjoy basic necessities. But Dubem would not change nor stop. She continuously prepared and served little and poorly nutritious meals. She kept turning off the lights and sockets in the house, except that of the freezer, because she didn't want the food items in it to go bad. She refused to use the air conditioner, and only Kenneth turned it on whenever he was around. She washed their clothes with her bare hands, as she complained that the washing machine would consume electricity if she uses it. She refused to use Uber rides and taxis, complaining that their fares were too high, and opted for commuter buses instead. One day, Kenneth decided to buy Dubem a car as a gift. "Did I ask you to buy me a car? I do not need a car. I am sure that this car cost a fortune. You could have saved the money instead. I don't want you spending money unnecessarily," Dubem yelled angrily. Kenneth stared at his wife in disbelief. Some other women would have jumped for joy to have been gifted a car by their husbands. But here was Dubem, getting angry, all because of her absurd ideology about how to save money. Kenneth wondered what he had gotten himself into. He remembered that at first he had felt lucky that he was marrying a woman who would be a good manager of his home and resources. But this was not what he had imagined. Well, Dubem outrightly refused to use the car, saying that the car would make them constantly spend money on fuel. "Using public bus is cheaper and I am a woman, so it is okay," she said, every time Kenneth tries to convince her to use the car. One day, Kenneth returned from work and discovered that Dubem had bought a kerosene stove. He inquired from her why she had bought it, and Dubem replied, "I noticed that the water heater consumes too much electricity. So, I bought the kerosene stove so we would use it to boil water instead." Kenneth took a deep sigh when he heard that and shook his head. He walked away without saying a word. He knew by this time that convincing Dubem otherwise was mission impossible. Over the months, Kenneth learned to ignore Dubem. He began sneaking into the kitchen to prepare his breakfast himself before Dubem would wake up to prepare a sparse meal for him as breakfast. He also started eating at restaurants and fast food outlets, something he once detested. A few months later, Dubem became pregnant and gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. For the first 6 months, Dubem fed her baby exclusively with breast milk. During this period, Kenneth constantly worried about Dubem and their baby because Dubem fed and ate poorly. After the 6 months duration, they were ready to start giving their baby additional food and baby formula. Kenneth, with recommendation from the baby's pediatrician, bought a good baby formula. But one day, Kenneth arrived from work and saw Dubem feeding their baby with corn pap instead of the baby formula he had bought. "Why are you feeding our baby with corn pap? What happened to the baby's formula?" Kenneth asked. "The baby's formula is finished," Dubem replied. "Why didn't you let me know?" Kenneth asked again. "Well, I found out that the baby's formula costs so much, so I have decided that our baby would have corn pap instead henceforth. We can't afford to waste much money on baby formulas," came Dubem's reply. Kenneth felt a frustration rise within him. Knowing Dubem so well, he scooped a little of the pap into his mouth to know if the pap was at least rich and nutritious. Well, he was not disappointed, as the pap tasted so ordinary and void of nutrients. Kenneth sighed in frustration. He didn't have a problem with Dubem choosing to give their baby corn pap instead, but had hoped that at least the pap would be nutritious. Instead of using only just yellow corn, he expected that Dubem would add other ingredients like millets, guinea corn, and soya beans at the very least. He told Dubem this and asked her to please add these things. But Dubem complained that it was as good as wasting money still if she added those things. All those things for just an ordinary pap. "No, please," she said, shaking her head. Kenneth got the pediatrician to advise and speak to Dubem and to educate her about the importance of feeding their baby a nutritious meal. Yet, Dubem would not change and kept feeding their baby with ordinary pap made of only yellow corn. One day, their baby became severely ill. Dubem, choosing to manage the situation, got paracetamol syrup and gave to the baby without consulting the pediatrician or informing Kenneth about it. However, one night, Kenneth noticed that the baby's temperature was unusually so high and that she wouldn't stop crying despite all the efforts he and Dubem put to pacify her. It was then that Dubem mentioned to him that the baby had been sick. This was 4 days after the baby had developed the fever. Kenneth was furious and asked why she hadn't informed him of this and why she hadn't taken the baby to the hospital at least. "It is just a fever. I am managing the situation. I have been giving her paracetamol. Taking her to the hospital will cause us to spend unnecessarily. So don't worry, she will be fine. It is common with babies to fall ill once in a while, I heard," Dubem replied. Kenneth, furious by her reply, picked his car key and ordered Dubem to get into the car as he drove to the hospital with their baby. However, and unfortunately, a few minutes after they arrived at the hospital and while they awaited the test results which had been conducted on their baby, the baby died. The results of the tests and cause of the baby's death was revealed to be a case of severe and prolonged malnutrition, which resulted in severe anemia, iron deficiency, and weakened immune system, resulting in the inability of the baby's immune system to fight off diseases and infections. The pediatrician told them that they would have at least managed to save the baby if they had brought the baby to the hospital on time when they discovered that she had developed severe fever. Well, While Dubem mourned the loss of their baby by crying uncontrollably, Kenneth mourned by expressing his long built-up frustration. In an outburst, he yelled on top of his voice as he blamed Dubem for their baby's death. He expressed his disgust at her method and way of supposedly trying to save money. "Forgive me, please. Forgive me. I didn't mean to kill our baby. I was scared and believed that by eating small portions of food, not adding so much to food, and even avoiding some necessities and not spending money, I was helping my husband to save money. I thought I was helping you to save money," Dubem said in tears, as she explained why she thought so and did all she did. Dubem had not always been from a poor background. Many years ago, when Dubem was a young teenage girl, her father, though not so wealthy, was averagely rich. He built a comfortable house, owned a comfortable car, always provided the basics for his family, and ensured that they wore good clothes. Dubem and her younger brother attended a good school. However, Dubem's mother got influenced by one of her rich friends and became greedy. She became unsatisfied with how they had been living and constantly demanded huge amounts of money from her husband to sponsor and fund a new lifestyle. And because she was a signatory to her husband's business and accounts, she started withdrawing his money and eventually squandered everything and caused the business to fail. This caused Dubem's father to suffer a heart attack, which eventually led to his death days later. Dubem's mother ran off with her newfound rich boyfriend when her husband died and left Dubem and her younger brother with their aunt, their father's older sister, who was angry that Dubem's mother had caused her brother's death and began maltreating Dubem and her younger brother because of this. "Your good-for-nothing mother caused my brother's death. A good woman helps her husband to save, manage his resources, and manage the home, even when her husband is extravagant, as it is in men's nature for them to do so because they are not built to be good managers. Instead, your mother squandered my brother's money. Your mother is a bad woman and was a bad wife," Dubem's aunt constantly said to Dubem and her brother. She maltreated them so bad and barely gave them food to eat. Then, she began giving Dubem to men in exchange for money. "You are a daughter of a bad woman who killed her husband and ran off with another man. Your mother is a prostitute. A daughter of a prostitute is a prostitute as well. So, you must make money for me by sleeping with these men," Dubem's aunt said, as she forced Dubem to sleep with different men who gave her money. These men were cruel and often raped Dubem as they considered her a sex object. Dubem endured it all until one day when her brother died after being sick for several weeks. Her aunt had refused to treat her brother and claimed that she had no money, despite all the money she got from the men who paid her to sleep with Dubem. Dubem, sad by her brother's death and unable to bear the suffering any longer, ran away from her aunt's place one night. She moved from place to place, doing odd jobs to feed and survive, until she found herself in Lagos. Dubem blamed her mother for what she went through, and the words of her aunts constantly echoed in her head. So, Dubem was trying not to be like her mother and did all she did because she wants to be a good wife who manages and helps her husband save money. When Kenneth heard Dubem's story, he became softened and his anger for her vanished. She had never told him this part of her story. He now understood Dubem better and her reason and the intent behind her actions. Dubem's actions and her absurd way of trying to save money was birthed from her mother's mistake and a traumatic experience. Kenneth held his wife and consoled her and promised to help her heal from her past trauma. He hired a professional therapist and had Dubem go through therapy. 1 year later, Dubem was better and was fully healed of her childhood trauma. She got better and prepared well-nutritious and delicious meals served in right portions. She began using her car, enjoyed the electricity, bought and wore beautiful clothes. She realized and came to learn that one can still save and manage their finances appropriately and wisely without depriving themselves of good food and basic necessities, especially if they can conveniently afford it. She got pregnant again a year later and they had another beautiful baby girl. An important lesson I want us to learn from this story is that while it is good to offer advice and words of wisdom, it is of most importance to check our mode of delivery and passing the advice. Dubem's aunt wasn't wrong when she had said that a good woman and wife helps her husband save and manages the home. However, her mode of delivery and the intent behind it was wrong. Inasmuch as the saying was true, it was coming from a place of anger, hate, and bitterness. Her words and actions inflicted wounds and trauma on Dubem. Secondly, we must always remember that our actions does not only affect or hurt us alone, but also hurt and affect our loved ones. Dubem's mother's greed had cost her husband and son's deaths, while also almost destroying Dubem's life. Likewise, Dubem's actions, though triggered by her past trauma, had caused her to lose her baby and caused her husband to suffer severe frustrations for months. Good thing she got therapy. I hope you enjoyed this story and that you have learned a thing or two from it. You can share with me in the comment section. I'll be waiting. Please support me by giving this video a like and share to your loved ones. And for those who still visit my channel but are yet to subscribe, please, what are you still waiting for? It doesn't cost much. Haven't I convinced you enough? Please support me and encourage me by hitting on the subscribe button now, so I will be encouraged to keep creating more stories like this. And if this is your first time of visiting my channel, also do not leave without hitting the subscribe button. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next story. Bye.